A glass cube sits on a steel table under clinical light. Inside it, a miniature sun hangs, bright and impossible. The air shimmers near the edges as if physics is being negotiated. A red warning glyph pulses on a nearby panel, unreadable but urgent. This is how the future first appeared in the records. Not as a miracle, as a containment problem that suddenly looked solvable. In 2025, fusion funding and milestones accelerated across public and private stacks. The US and its allies treated it like a strategic option, not science fiction. China treated it like industrial destiny, measured in decades and megawatts. By 2026, the question wasn't, can you make fusion happen once? It became, can you make it happen on schedule, on budget, and on a grid? Here's the central question that follows every page of this file. When energy becomes abundant, who controls the price anyway? The lie isn't that fusion works. The lie is that fusion automatically makes energy cheap. Abundance is physics. Access is law, ownership, and the speed of deployment. You stand close enough to the glass to feel heat that shouldn't exist. You realize the first commercial fusion nation doesn't just get power. It gets leverage over every oil-based economy still paying for scarcity. That leverage doesn't arrive with an invasion. It arrives with contracts rewriting themselves overnight. History rarely changes with a loud announcement. It changes when one system becomes obsolete in silence. This is the moment the records call the start of the singularity. Not an AI singularity, an energy singularity. Signals before the breakthrough. In the 2025 memos, fusion stops reading like a science project. It reads like an industrial schedule, with money assigned to milestones. Private fusion funding climbs past $10 billion by mid-2025. Governments move the same way, just slower and more quietly. In October 2025, the U.S. Energy Department publishes a fusion roadmap. It treats commercialization as a national capability, not a lab curiosity. Then the market starts acting like the breakthrough is inevitable. In 2025, Helion raises $425 million and targets grid delivery by 2028. Its deal with Microsoft is framed as power procurement, not an experiment. The contract value isn't the point. The signal is that buyers show up early. By late 2025. Other firms raise rounds sized like heavy industry projects.
As the timeline
Tokamak
approaches the
programs
marker, we
pitch net
anticipate
energy
reaching the target
timelines
temperature
around
for the
2026. Demonstrations. Designs are sold as repeatable plants, not one-off physics victories. But the file keeps circling one missing line item. The constraint is not ignition in a chamber. It is turning that fire into electricity that survives audits and uptime guarantees.
It works.
A reactor can work and still fail as a business. So who sells you the sun? Fusion's black box. Simply, a pellet-sized fuel capsule rests in a tray like a jewel. A technician seals it inside a chamber built from layered steel and ceramic. The walls look overbuilt because they're designed for years of punishment. Fusion is not a big spark. It is a factory that must repeat the same controlled violence all day. Think of it like keeping a lightning storm inside a turbine housing. The storm is physics. The turbine is engineering. Old fusion chased one victory, net gain in a shot. Bailang, 2025 to 2026. The language shifts to plant integration and uptime. That is where most prototypes die. Because grids don't buy breakthroughs, they buy reliable megawatts. The bottleneck is what the memos call the three-body problem. First, materials that survive constant neutron damage and heat cycling. Second, a fuel cycle that actually feeds itself, especially tritium. Civilian inventories are measured in tens of kilograms, not supply chains. Third, maintenance cadence that doesn't turn a plant into a museum. So commercialization becomes a war of boring details. Component lifetimes, replacement logistics, insurance models. First nation to solve those details doesn't just light a city, it rewrites the energy balance sheet of the world. Who owns the star? In the 2030 procurement notes, the reactor isn't the prize. The prize is the license that lets you operate it without lawsuits. Fusion becomes a stack of permissions layered on top of physics. You watch the ownership layer form like frost on glass. Core designs get locked behind patents and trade controls. Manufacturing tolerances become proprietary, then enforced by standards. Even maintenance software ships with keys you don't own. Here's the third hook, and it lands hard. Permission, not physics, sets the price. Fuel is the second gate, and it's quieter. Early commercial machines still lean on deuterium-tritium cycles. But global civilian tritium inventories sit around 20 kilograms. Not a market. A single commercial-scale fleet can burn through that head start fast. So breeding technology becomes the real strategic asset. If you can't breed and process tritium at scale, you can't scale fusion. By 2032, the first fusion nation doesn't just sell electrons. It sells capacity, uptime guarantees, and licensing terms. Oil states see the math and feel the floor drop out. Not because oil disappears overnight. Because the premium for scarcity collapses when someone else can print baseload. 2026 to 2036, the first plants. By 2028, pilot plants stop being PR tours. They start being grid conversations with penalties and uptime clauses. A prototype that runs for minutes is no longer impressive. The new standard is repeatability measured in months. From 2026 to 2031, the first shockwaves hit in procurement. Utilities and hyperscalers begin reserving future baseload the way they once reserved gas. Local governments start competing for sites with cooling water and transmission. The public thinks it's clean energy jobs. The file treats it as strategic siting for permanent leverage. Then, 2032 to 2036 becomes the system shift. The first nation with credible commercial fusion can undercut volatility. It offers power contracts that don't care about shipping lanes or sanctions. That changes how industry prices everything else. Oil doesn't go to zero in a year, but the oil premium collapses because scarcity is no longer guaranteed. Petrostates that budgeted on high-margin exports face a silent downgrade. Some respond with diversification and new alliances. Others respond with instability because the old bargain breaks. This is how the fusion singularity begins. Not with free energy for everyone, with one region writing the first post-scarcity contract, then selling it slowly. 2037. 2. 2046. Abundance, locked behind law. By 2041. Fusion plants sit on grids like quiet engines with no fuel convoys. Outages fall and carbon fades, but pricing stops following physics. Abundance arrives. Your bill still climbs. Licenses, safety keys, and patent pools attach tolls to every megawatt hour. In 2043, a household plan includes a fixed royalty line item each month. You meet a warehouse refrigeration supervisor in Kansas City in 2044. His freezers run steady now, yet the bill carries an authorized output surcharge. He misses one compliance update, and the utility bumps him to a higher tier. 2 weeks later, his margins vanish, and he lays off 2 loaders. He learns to buy power-like software, renewing keys and audits every quarter. He keeps the lights on, but he feels rented to the stack. The upside is undeniable. Desalination, industrial heat, and grid stability expand without fuel shocks. The risk is monopoly energy, where patents decide who scales and who stalls. Once licensing becomes the safety regime, regulators can't unwind it quickly. That is the point of no return. Permission becomes scarcer than power. Verdict: the $1 trillion lie. The lie was never fusion won't work. The lie was fusion will make energy cheap by default. What is a sun worth when you need a license? The winners are the owners of the stack around the reactor. Patent holders win because they set the toll booth. Standards bodies win because they define what counts as safe. Nations with breeding capability win because fuel becomes strategic. Grid operators win because they can sell reliability as a premium product. The losers are everyone who expected physics to lower prices automatically. Small manufacturers lose when energy becomes a subscription with compliance keys. Petrostates lose faster than they can diversify, and some destabilize. Households lose quietly when abundance arrives, but bills still rise. Free energy can still make you poor. 3 structural risks hardened by the early 2040s. First, monopoly licensing turns baseload into rent extraction. Second, tritium and materials bottlenecks create a fragile scaling ceiling. Third, the first fusion advantage triggers geopolitical shock in oil corridors. The controlled upside is real if governance is disciplined. If patents are time-boxed or bought out, prices can fall fast. If licensing is regulated like telecom, access expands without chaos. If fusion is deployed as infrastructure, the world gets stability without scarcity. The lever: patents, standards, and fuel cycle control around commercial reactors. The bill: households, small industry, and oil economies absorbing sudden obsolescence. Point of no return: when fusion contracts replace fossil scarcity as baseline. You close the file. The numbers are real. The timelines are closing. Whatever path we choose, the future has already begun assembling itself. Piece by irreversible piece, while most of the world is still looking the other way. This was only one dossier. Many more are waiting.